Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. As of this recording, and we will dox this recording, kids. We'll give you the deep details, everything you need to know about peeling the curtain back on the 6M. Today is March 1st, 2023. As of today, as of this very recording, Paul McCartney, the fourth, well, should I say the fourth Beatle? He's not the fourth Beatle. I guess you would say he's the second Beatle. Because in John's words, do you want to join me, band? So Paul technically is the second Beatle, I suppose. The second Beatle is still with us. Because you guys saw the name of this episode. We put a question mark at the end, not because we're venturing a guess on the eventual demise of Sir Paul McCartney. We are actually going to address what a lot of you already know. If you're Beatles fans, you get it. We're going to address the outlandish story that's existed since 1966. But again, as you're reading this, or excuse me, listening to this, I should say, Sir Paul McCartney is still with us. Why do I feel the need to tell you this? Well, the truth is, any of us could go at any time, but Mr. McCartney is 80 years old, and all due respect, I don't want to be the guy that creates a podcast episode called Paul is Dead, and then Paul unfortunately passes away soon thereafter. That would not be a good day for me. I'm a huge Beatles fan, as is Phil. So I want to get that out of the way to clear up any confusion any of you may have. So again, if you're a Beatles fan, you know exactly what we're talking about. And if you don't, let's fill you in. Paul is Dead is an urban legend and conspiracy theory alleging that Paul McCartney of the Beatles died on November 9th, 1966, and was secretly replaced by a look-alike. The rumor began circulating in 1967, gaining broad popularity in September of 1969 following reports on American college campuses. According to the theory or rumor, Paul died in a car crash, and to spare the public from grief, the surviving Beatles replaced him with a McCartney look-alike, subsequently communicating this secret through subtle details of their albums, which continue to this day. And that is your lowdown on Paul is Dead. A lot more to get into here. Phil, I know you've been a Beatles fan for quite some time. Do you remember when you first became aware of this story? I mean, maybe not what age, but when did it really start to enter your language and enter your world? This idea that Paul McCartney had died in '66. Do you recall?
I had to be in my 20s by then. I was about to say college, but no, it probably was after that because it had to be. I had to be in my 20s by that time. Um, and this was in the age of YouTube, and you can just go look up things on YouTube and see clips about random urban legends and conspiracy theories. And somebody on YouTube will do the work of collecting all these things into one video, and you can just watch it. And I watched a bunch of YouTube videos about it at one point, and I was just like, "This is really, really weird. Like people really believe this, huh?"
Oh, baby, do they believe it? Straight up, legitimately believe it. And you and I covered Revolver, the album review, and we did it in two parts, mostly because we want to take our time with it and do it justice. And this came up on the tail end of part two, which is what led us to this episode. Can't believe it took us this long to hit it. So yeah,
Um, did didn't we mention it during the Abbey Road episode as well?
I'm sure we did, and I'm sure we mentioned it in the White Album and Rubber Soul. We've probably mentioned it quite a bit here. So yeah, you're right, because there's clues everywhere, and I can't wait to get into that. But Yeah, I don't know if I told this story. I think I did. I don't remember, but I'll tell it again. I've got a good friend who's always been a Beatles fan. He shall remain nameless. And one day I hadn't seen him in a while, and he's talking to me about this. I'm like, yeah, what a crazy thing, whatever. And he just won't stop, and he just keeps going and going and going. After a few minutes, I summarized that, okay, he's not playing. He believes this, and I finally said, dude, this is just something that someone made up, right? And he's like, oh no, man, there's a lot of proof there. I was like, proof, proof, you say? What is this proof you speak of? Uh, do you buy for? All right, let's just call it what it is, Phil. We call this crazy. Let's look past the wackadoodles. Hard to do, right? I get it. Try if you can for a moment. Look past the wackadoodles. Is there any reality in which this is fact and not fiction? Can you even wrap your head around the possibility of this, or is it just too far fetched for you?
No. I think when you read enough of this stuff and you watch a lot of it, and you just get inundated with the information, for a brief second, it does make you question things because that's what these things do. That's what conspiracy theories do. It's just like, oh, that is kind of eerie. Oh, that does kind of line up. But then when you think about it long enough, it's like, wait a minute. You'd have to find another guy that is as talented as a musician as Paul was, that looks like him, that can play bass, and not just can play bass left-handed. Um, yeah, no. What are the odds that you just have some guy that's walking around the planet Earth that looks similar enough to Paul McCartney and can play bass and can sing similar to him? No, no, no. This falls apart when you really think about it.
And I think that's where I'm lost as well. You know what? I can humor these people to a point. I can. I can say, okay, fine. He was killed in a car crash. And at that point, were there Beatles impersonators? I'm sure there were. And they had only been on the scene for what, 2 years? I'm
Mhm.
sure that there were already impersonators around. I'm sure of it. Why not? But like, and like tribute bands and whatnot. Absolutely. So I'll go with that. And I'll go that, you know what? I'll even admit they found somebody that looks close enough to him. Sure. Okay. But where it falls apart is this guy didn't have to fool the other three, but he had to fool who all was in on it, Phil. Was George Martin in on this? Was Brian Epstein in on it? Brian was still with us
Every
in 66, right?
Everybody in their social circle would have to be in on it.
Yeah.
Everybody that had any kind of relationship with Paul would have to be in on it. Um, yeah, no, that's again another thing that makes this fall apart is that if he had been dead for that long, somebody that knew him would have spilled the beans by now.
Hmm.
Somebody would spill the beans around the 70s or 60s. There's no way that everybody in his circle, I mean, everybody that's ever known this man would keep this thing a secret that long. There's no way.
There's
Um,
no way.
and and I mean, one of the hints that it's not really him and that Fall, as he's called, people, not Paul, Faul,
Ah,
Fall.
yes.
Um, Fall is right-handed, but then I say again, you have to find a guy that is right-handed but can convincingly play bass with his left hand. You know how hard that is.
I'm right-handed. It's hard enough playing the bass right-handed.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
not yeah. Come on, man. There's not a lot of ambidextrous bass players in the world. Um, no, that this would be. I don't know. There's too much to this. That's once you really think about it, with any real thought, it becomes far fetched.
Yeah, and so they would have to have told everybody, or yeah, or it doesn't work. Because like, you mean to tell me that Keith Richards didn't realize it? The other bands they knew, like Mick Jagger didn't know. These guys that they'd known for years, like they didn't. No one
Yeah,
picked up on it. Like,
Paul's girlfriend just stayed, just played along.
yeah, Jane Asher, right? Yeah,
So
that.
maybe that's why they mysteriously broke up. Ooh.
That's good.
I
You're
don't
not the
know.
same man I fell in love with.
Yeah, I don't even know who you are anymore.
Yeah. Oh, it's nuts. Yeah, I dove on this last weekend. And I was gonna wait till closer to the show here, but I don't know. It was on the brain, so I dove into it and I watched like 6 videos, and I saw one guy comparing it to like the hysteria around the Kennedy assassination, and I'm like, I don't mean to come off sound like a wackadoodle myself, but you're going to compare the murder of the president with a a, a litany, a list of witnesses and eyewitnesses who gave testimony to the FBI that were all dead within 5 years of unnatural causes. Some of them in their early 30s. Come on. Like, you know what I mean? Again, this is not a Kennedy episode or anything, but you're going to compare that to this. Like, his point was, if you want to believe a conspiracy bad enough, you'll find things that will fit your narrative, which
Absolutely.
he's right on this part for the Beatles thing for sure.
Absolutely. The only thing that I would say links this and the Kennedy assassination is that they're around the same time because the
Mm,
Kennedy assassination was in the early '60s. Um,
63, yeah.
and so I do think that um, the theories that came out of the Kennedy assassination did lead more people into believing these conspiracy theories about other things. It was definitely a boom period for those things, which sounds crazy, a boom period for conspiracy theories. But I do think '60s was a time where people started questioning things, and I could see how you would draw that correlation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's around the same time. Yeah, there's just a lot of there's so much stuff here, kids. If you've never dove into this, I'm telling you, just reserve an evening, save an evening if you can, because it's going to be longer than a 10-minute deep dive. This is going to take a heck of a long time for you to go into it independently of this. Take this pod when when you listen to it, use it as reference, but then go and dive for yourself because it will take you a while. So the beginning of this is around 50 years ago, Detroit DJ accidentally started the biggest hoax in rock and roll history. This from Rolling Stone, by the way, kids. The Paul is Dead craze. It blew up on October 12th, 1969, when Russ Gibb was hosting his show on WKNR. A mysterious caller told him to put on the Beatles' White Album and spin the number nine intro from Revolution 9 backwards. When Gibb tried on the air, he heard the words, "Turn me on, dead man." The clues kept coming. At the end of Strawberry Fields Forever, John says, "I buried Paul." What could it all mean? And also, Phil, if you listen, by the way, those words are completely there. However, if you want to listen to them and hear something else, you can hear something else as well. So, um, and it all goes back to this idea that, again, the Beatles are hiding a secret. Paul is killed in a car crash in 1966. The band replaces him with an imposter. If you had told me that this was in 63, because they landed in the States on February 7th, 1963, and they played Ed Sullivan for the first time on February 9th, 63. If you told me that this accident happened on February 25th, 63, I'll be honest with you, Phil, a lot more believability there, because other than people and bands they knew in England, who over here would know the difference? But we had not even begun to see Paul and John's creative, mystique. We hadn't seen it at all yet. But by this time, we've had 2 full years of what these guys could do, and we'd seen them every day of our lives. The American public has seen them every day of their lives on TV and newspapers, hear them on the radio, what have you. Then they're going to tell us that he's dead. Come on. Like, again, if this happened, 10 days after they arrived in the States. Okay, now I'm listening. Now prove it to me. But yeah, like you said, there's too many. There's just it doesn't make sense for at least, again, 2 full years. Was it? Well, 3 full years at this point, right? 3 full years just about when he supposedly died in 66, which is utterly nonsense. Um,
I
why,
mean,
dude? Crazy.
well, if we want to play into the theory, um, this was right around the time the Beatles stopped touring. This is right around the time when the Beatles' music had drastically changed. Um, it still is far fetched, but I you can look at stuff like them coming out with a concept album as their very first album after he supposedly died,
Hmm.
and coming up with a fake lead singer at the time. Uh, and of course, a lot of the visual cues that people come up with from album covers started from Sergeant Pepper as well.
Very true. And one of the funny stories here, there's a bunch of them, right? But when all this started, some Paul said, "quote Someone from the office rang me up and said, 'Look, Paul, you're dead.'" And I said, "Oh, I don't agree with that." End quote.
Oh, I don't agree with
Yeah.
that. I would think so.
So let's get into the intricacies of this. Paul died on November 9th, 1966. It's hard to say without even laughing. He drove away from Abbey Road Studios late the night before, a stupid bloody Tuesday. Well, there you go. There's one hint. Then blew his mind out in a car. He was officially pronounced dead, OPD, which is the sleeve he's wearing on the Sergeant Pepper outfit, on Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins, which is why George points to that line on the Sergeant Pepper sleeve while Paul wears an OPD patch. But the other Beatles decided to hush up the news, so Wednesday morning papers didn't come. This is so well written. Somehow they kept Paul's death a secret, replacing him with a lookalike, then dropped sly hints about the cover up scam. The imposter wrote Hey Jude and Blackbird, which means he's the guy who probably should have had Paul's job in the first place. Fans began whispering about all the clues on the just released. This was when this was written. They re-released Abbey Road. By the way, kids, if you've not listened to that big honking re-release of Abbey Road, I highly recommend it. It is effing fantastic. Um, let's go ahead, dude. Let's dive into these covers, man. Let's talk about these covers because let's get into the Abbey Road cover first. Let's talk about what clues exist here. What all do you know about the clues on the cover of Abbey Road?
Okay, so the original clue is that the them walking single file like that is because it is a funeral procession.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, John is out in front in all white because he is the priest. Uh, Ringo is second. He's dressed in all black because he's the Undertaker, and George is trailing behind in denim because he is the gravedigger. And in the middle is Paul because he's dead, and he's barefoot because that is a symbol for uh, the deceased.
Yep. Holding the cigarette in his right hand when he's left-handed.
Correct. Also, there's also, of course, the Beetle in the background with the license plate that supposedly reads 28 if, because at the time, Paul would have been 28.
That's it. Yep. And John has always been described as the Christ-like figure because he's wearing white. I mean, long hair and beard helps as well, I'm sure. So if you look back, kids, this was just one photograph that they took that day. They took like five, I think, maybe five or six, maybe more. And those photos have been published over the years. They're walking out of sequence. Sometimes two are walking, two are standing. I think one of them's sitting down in one of the photos. They're walking opposite direction. They're walking in different orders. This just so happened to be the photo that when they looked, they said, "Oh, this is the best photo by far." And they
Yeah.
stuck with it. But I think apparently that VW Bug wasn't even in the other photos. I think it just popped up and someone parked it and did their business or whatever.
So the story behind him being barefoot is that Paul had on sandals that day,
Mm-hmm.
and it was hot, and he decided to take his sandals off. That's why he was barefoot. Um, the Beetle in the background, as you said, someone pulled up and parked because they only had the street blocked off for a certain amount of time. They went to try and find the guy to move his car. They couldn't find the guy, and they just didn't have enough time, so they just shot the pictures with the Beetle in the background. The license plate is purely coincidence. As a matter of fact, at the time that the album was recorded, Paul was 27, not 28.
And isn't the if that's not an I, that's a one, isn't it?
Yes.
I think, yeah. Yeah. There again, dude. If you want to see something bad enough, you're going to see it.
Yeah, confirmation bias at its purest.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, we got the Abbey Road album. We've got other things. Oh man, we're going to tackle Pepper, and we're going to kind of be going out of order here because there's a lot of stuff about the Sergeant Pepper thing. But like, and again, this is out of step. But one of the things that's jumping into my head is Magical Mystery Tour because John has the line in Glass Onion with "I've got another clue for you all. The walrus was Paul," which supposedly the walrus represents death. There's a thing about a hand over Paul's head on album covers and in photographs, which also supposedly denotes a dead man, which, by the way, I don't think there's any basis in that, a fact in that at all.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, could so I suppose the story with the Magical Mystery Tour and I Am a Walrus is that didn't Paul find some study somewhere that people were studying uh, Beatles records and he decided that he wanted to make a song that was absolutely about nothing? And that way he sent people running around in circles trying to interpret it. Um, but the song "I Am a Walrus" doesn't mean anything. It's gibberish. It's complete nonsense. Um, and any reference to it later is the same. It's just a way to send people chasing their tail at something that doesn't exist. Um, the walrus symbolism as well is funny because it's another one of those. If you look at the cover, it's one of the only places where Paul is out of place with the other band because everybody else's costumes are white. The walrus costume is black,
Mm,
and so it's symbolism of he's wearing black because he's dead. Um, but if you look at the videos and stuff from that time period where they're all in the costumes from the I Am the Walrus cover, the guy out front that playing bass is not dressed as a walrus. The guy in the back playing piano is dressed as a walrus. So the walrus would be clearly John, not Paul.
of course. And, you know, they have denied placing supposed clues in the music.
I mean,
Or
John clearly was messing with people.
I believe they were always putting clues in. I think once they heard this story, that they said, well, let's give them something to find. I believe that 100%. And you're right about the walrus, man. He said, look, and I, by the way, kids, this is no means to actually quote the man. Something to the effect of, everyone's trying to find meaning in our songs and put, piece things together and go A to B to C, whatever. I'm going to give them a song complete gibberish. These lyrics mean nothing. And it was like, I think the quote was something to the effect of, let the effers figure this one out. Let them have fun with this. And Phil, sure enough, people have dissected that song and said, oh, this is ahead of its time. John was commenting on the social structure in these lyrics, and he's talking about sitting on the cornflake waiting for the man to come. What? That what? Those are deep lyrics? Okay,
Yes.
sure.
Um. Yeah.
I'm beyond confused. And by the way, it's one of my favorite Beatles songs of all time. I freaking love that song. And it's absolutely ridiculous. But John was at his best when he was goofing around. This is the same guy who, during the concert at Shea Stadium, which was their last concert, and his not the first time he'd done it, Phil. You'll watch it if you watch clips, you'll see it. But he had this thing, and man, this sounds horrible, and because it is horrible. But he had this thing he would do to try to crack the other three Beatles up during songs. He would take his left leg and he would do like this sideways movement, stomping up and down on the stage, and he was mimicking or trying to mock a handicapped person. And, not to defend John here, because I'm not going to do that. That's pretty insanely hurtful. But Ringo has talked about it through the years and said, we were going crazy at some points because we were always on the road and people would want to come up and want autographs and people were bringing their handicapped children to the Beatles to meet them as if these guys were Jesus and could heal them. And so I guess they had just seen so many people like this that and in order to keep their sanity and make each other laugh and try to, not take everything too seriously, they were trying to crack each other up with references to that, which again, Phil, doesn't age well. and is a mean thing to do anyway. But that's the guy we're talking about, Phil. We're not talking about. And John was an amazing songwriter. Don't get me wrong, but again, I'm the Walrus doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of if you watch the movie Notorious and Biggie's uh description of Pac in the movie of that, Pac could be insightful and profound, but sometimes he was just a guy that liked to with people.
Hmm. Yeah, for
And
sure.
I feel like that kind of description fits John as well. That John could be incredibly smart and wise, and he could be very creative and innovative, but sometimes he was just a guy that liked a good joke.
Yeah, somebody just wanted to mess with you. Yeah, for sure. 100%. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. God, dude, we could spend 2 hours and maybe not be able to get all this. I don't know. So let's talk about the because it's probably the biggest. I was gonna say clue. There's no clues here. It's just what people have come up with over the years. But let's talk about the cover
So,
of
so bef-
Sergeant Pepper.
b- before you get into that, the clues thing is actually funny when you think about it as well, because you're telling me that the Beatles planned this massive cover up, but the people that are putting out the clues about this massive cover up are the people that created the cover up. Um, and so are we to believe that the Beatles felt that guilty about this thing that they covered up, and that they don't feel like their friend can rest in peace, that they hated this so much that they put these clues out to the world to try and get people to figure it out?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Because I guess if you follow that line of thinking, the person that didn't get along with Fall or William Campbell,
William
um,
Campbell, Billy Shears.
Billy Shears, it was John, and so John was the one that was trying to put these things out there because he hated them, but at the same time, he was the guy that covered up. He was the guy that covered it up initially. So I don't. Yeah, when you think about that long, it kind of falls apart.
There's so many things here that would make this a better story, Phil. Like if the story was that management and George Martin and the powers that be with the record company said you have to do this. We're not giving you a choice because of contracts or whatever, some kind of mysterious hold that have over the band, and the band reluctantly did this when they really didn't want to do it. They wanted to be honest and tell their fans what happened, and then as a way of fighting back against being forced to do this, then they put clues in the albums. Isn't that a much
Well,
better story?
yes, but I suppose going with that, um, isn't the theory also that the government was a big part of this cover up,
True.
and so that maybe that's where the reluctance came from the Beatles' part, that it's that the government was trying to force them to keep this hoax going. They didn't want to keep it going.
Yeah, because the government were afraid of a national I don't know, catastrophe. What's the word? National panic if Paul was found to be dead. Like it's all going to fall apart if Paul McCartney's dead. No disrespect to Paul McCartney, but
I suppose.
have you seen Bubba Hotep, by the way?
I haven't.
All right. I've got your weekend watching assignment. Same goes for you, kids. It's Bubba Hotep and it's Bruce Campbell. And stay with me. It's a movie about an Elvis impersonator who's actually Elvis, who replaced the king. Actually, dude, if I tell you too much, I'll give it away. Elvis is not dead, Phil. Not in this movie. It's ridiculous. It's completely insane. But when thinking about the Paul is dead thing, I think about this idea that there was this big cover up, and it turns out the way that things went down, he would not be able to prove he was actually Elvis because of something that happens in the film. I don't want to give it away, but when it happens, you're like, oh God, he can never prove he's Elvis. They did. He'll just come off sound like a wacky old man in a retirement home. But for some reason, I think about that when I think about the Paul is dead thing because this is utterly ridiculous. And in that, the idea, and the idea here was that, and the whole Elvis is dead or not dead conspiracy, whatever, came because he was trying to escape his fame. It had ruined his life. It had ruined his marriage. He was a terrible father, and he was a backstabbing, no good, cheating husband, and he was a drug addict or whatever because of the fame, Phil, not because of choices, because of fame. So he wanted to escape the fame, escape the fans, leave it all behind. So he faked his own death. But like with this, it's a guy that supposedly died 3 years into the most successful band on the planet's run. And I don't know. It's very, I don't know. It's messed up. Yeah, a lot to get to here. So John Lennon was quoted as saying, "They said I was wearing a white religious suit." I mean, did Humphrey Bogart wear a white religious suit? All I've got is a nice Humphrey Bogart suit. So he was making fun of it. That was in '69. So yeah, they constantly just, ribbed this and teased it and made fun of it, and it is what it is. But like, then later on, Phil, when when John and Paul are going to war, and How Do You Sleep, John says those freaks were right when they said you was dead. So
Of
yeah,
course, because again, John likes to mess with people.
of course he does. So other than that, all right. So if you take, okay, if the Magical Mystery Tour album, you turn it upside down and look because there's stars that make up the Beatles logo, right? That make up the
Hmm.
words of the Beatles. There's a phone number. Have you heard this bit?
Yes.
There's a phone number, and it's 231-7438, which apparently could be dialed for information on Paul is dead. But then
Um,
there's other ways to view the number. It's really messed up.
yeah. Apparently, there are anecdotes of people saying they called the number and got cryptic information, or spoke to William Campbell himself. Which again, so you want me to believe that they would put the number for Fall on the cover of this album, and people would call, and he'd go, "Yep, yep, it's me. I'm not Paul. See you later."
Oh yeah, supposedly some recorded messages say you're getting closer, or that the number connected straight to a funeral home. One U.S. newspaper printed this clue, claiming the calls were being answered by someone claiming to be Billy Shears. Yet others claim when they dialed up the number, they were invited to take a secret trip with the Beatles. What?
Yeah, I think you better hang up now because that
Yeah.
might have been early inception of catfishing.
Ah, very well done. Yeah. So again, if you hold it upside down, it's not a 2, it's a 5. Excuse me, 537-1438. I'm bound and determined to dial that number. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. What happens if I dial that number in real time as we're recording this? What if some wackadoodle answers? The problem is I'll ask for area code, won't it? Because I don't dial an area code.
Yeah.
Please enter an extension, then press pound to connect with your lead.
Well, if only I had an extension for Paul McCartney. I could speak to him.
Come on. This was decades ago. I'm sure that number is disconnected by now.
That's true. There is the 237 option. We could try that one. It's not over till it's over, kids. 237. Excuse me, 231. Right? 23. Okay, so there's different variations of this. 537-1438, which is what I just dialed, or 231-7438. This will be the one for sure. Don't let me down.
Doom, 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 doom,
Don't let
doom,
me.
doom,
Yeah,
doom.
I caught it when I did it. It's dialing, but no one's answering. Oh,
Your call cannot be completed at this time.
that's a conspiracy right there.
Hmm.
I bet that was Fall's voice just sped up to throw me off the track. There you go. Phone number's not working, children. I don't know what to tell you. Everybody wrapped up in this one that happened. My God in heaven. Now it's funny, and we're doing this show, and there's been a million of them done in all sorts of formats since all this became a thing. But like, again, Phil, if you're in the hysteria of this, it's not like, I go back to the Elvis thing. I'm not saying that it makes sense, but I kind of understand fans not wanting to let him go. It's like, we don't want to let him go, right? I miss him. I wish he wasn't dead. I wish he was still here. I'd love to see him again. Well, then maybe you'll fall for he is not really dead. He faked it. But like Paul's still here. And if he's not here, Phil, this guy's an amazing double. He's an amazing stand-in. He's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah. Went on to make some of Paul's best music. Like I feel like Paul went on to get better and better as a musician from '69 on. So this guy's not Paul. He's pretty incredible. Um, isn't one of the other hint from the Magical Mystery Tour the visuals for the album or one of the videos for the album where they all have the white tuxes on and he's the only one with a black carnation on?
Well done. Yeah. And it's the scene where they're coming down the staircase in the film. And he's got the black carnation on. And he explains it away by saying that we just ran out of red. So I put on black. But Phil, if you look at the footage, he's carrying a basket of red flowers in his hand.
Yeah.
So like, what?
But again I say if he is really not Paul, why would he agree to wear a hint that will let people know that he's not Paul?
Yeah. Well, because he was tired of living the life, Phil. He was tired of being a multimillionaire. He was sick of the notoriety and the fame and the
No.
cars and the women. And
He didn't want to be Paul. He just wanted to be Billy again, man. He just wanted to let everybody know who he really was and get fame for being Billy Shears. He didn't want to get fame based off of somebody else's name.
that's right, dude. I mean, Billy Shears was a very good musician, obviously.
Yeah, I don't know. But I don't know. Maybe the other Beatles put a joke on him. It was like, hey, you wear this black carnation, we'll all wear red. It makes you stand out. It makes you look special, man.
Yeah. You're the best of us. You're the best one here. You're the most talented. I mean, now we know why all the arguments in the Get Back sessions happened, because they were just sick of this pretender.
Yeah.
Sick of it.
When you look at the pictures from the movie, by the way, it's funny that John was walking around during this time period without glasses and he could not see.
Good call. So many weird details like that. Like the granny glasses that John started wearing, if I'm remembering correctly, he found them in a secondhand shop and thought they looked cool and bought them. And he wore them so long, he eventually couldn't see without them, because they were actual prescription glasses and not just fake glass, just regular glass in the lenses. He just thought they looked cool. But I don't know if that's true or not, because if you look back at the photos of them when they first landed in the States, the old black and white photos, he's got the black horn rimmed glasses on as if he needed them.
Well, yeah, I thought he needed glasses in real life. Like I thought like that was part of the uh grooming of the Beatles, and like the publicist was like, yeah, no, take these glasses off. If you want to throw that as a nod to that thing you do, which is also clearly has riffs off of Beatles, it's they had shades walking around with the shades all the time and he couldn't see. It's the opposite for John. No, take the glasses off so you look like everybody else. Yeah. So it has a uniform look. Even though he needed the glasses to see.
Well, I mean, either that, Phil, or it was just another clever ruse to throw us off the track.
Maybe he never needed glasses all along. Maybe it's also a hoax all along. Maybe he could see perfectly well.
It's all meant to distract us from Paul being dead, Phil. I don't know what more to tell you. Get with the
Um,
game. Get with the game here, man.
yeah. If I remember, so if we also get into, because again, if my conjecture is, but how would they find somebody that looks a lot like Paul? There are a lot of pictures out here with side by sides of them, and they're like, but they really don't look alike. Look, this guy's ears are bigger. This guy's taller. Um, if you look at his face, there are different distinctions in his face. This guy has green eyes, and Paul had brown eyes.
I mean, how are they explaining all that anyway? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen pictures of them next to each other, and Paul's eyes are more green today, and in some of the older pictures, his eyes are dark and they look brown. But I took that to be that his eyes were dark green, and the pigmentation just eventually lightened over time.
I mean, not to mention the fact, Phil, that in 1963 he was 21 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but when people age, they start to change. Their appearance changes. I mean, especially this thing happens with especially men. Their ears start to grow. Um, it happens. But yeah, no, there are. If you look up side by side pictures with this Paul is dead stuff, there are a lot of pictures out there of people doing side by side comparisons of Paul from the early '60s and after the '60s and how different he started to look.
Yeah, we're just forgetting the fact that people just age. You're 100% right.
Um, yeah. I think when I did jump into this stuff, the biggest symbolism that I did kind of think was strange is the cover of Sergeant Pepper up, because when you do look at it that way, it does look like a funeral, because just the
Hmm.
way that it has the flowers out front, and it has the four members out in the out in the middle, and it has all of this stuff around them, like it looks like people are gathering for something to for a funeral. Or you have the old members of the Beatles are there. You have all of these nods to their old career, as in they're moving on from uh, what the band used to be. But I didn't take that at. But again, once you really think about it, that's not literal. I feel like that is a metaphorical thing, that they're moving on from what the band used to be. Like, I don't think it's a literal deaths of anybody. um, yeah, I mean, there's all those other weird clues and visual hints in the album cover that people run with. Like, isn't there something on the inside sleeve where Paul is the only one with his back to us and everybody else is looking straight ahead?
Yes, and that's where George has got he's got his finger pointing up, and they've got right where his finger is pointing was the clue that I gave earlier, right to that one specific lyric.
Yeah, yeah, and they've got outtakes of the cover for Sergeant Pepper as well that kind of debunk that there are other pictures that could have ended up being the inside cover. Um, there's always there's always somewhere black in a picture with Paul around that time period, and that's where people draw these conclusions, because Paul is holding a clarinet on the cover of Sergeant Pepper. He's the only one holding a black instrument, um, and he's standing dead in the middle. There are the flowers that are in the shape of a guitar at the front of the album cover is in the shape of a left-handed guitar, which is purely coincidence.
Yeah, you're right. And look, there's pictures of this cover before this cover because again, they played around with it and they just landed on this particular version of the cover.
Yeah, but if you want to buy into this hoax, that album cover was the one where I looked at it. I was like, yeah, this does look like a funeral. When you really look at it, like, looks like a funeral.
It does look like a
um,
funeral because Abbey Road was the funeral procession.
yeah, it,
So,
it it does look like a funeral when you really look at it. Like the way people are all huddled together,
mhm.
and just like the flowers and everything, it does. But I think again, that's a metaphorical funeral, and
And,
again, that's an interpretation.
oh, dude, I love this cover. It's probably the most classic cover of all time. There's very few, in my opinion, that beat this. Not because of the silly Paul's dead stuff, but for a litany of other reasons. It's just fantastic. But you've already revealed some things here, but let's dig into this for sure. So Paul is facing the camera as though he were being supported by his bandmate standing at his sides, which is fair. It does look like they're all, like John's kind of hunched down as if they're all providing support for Paul to stand upright. 100% agree. Can't argue that. Again, means nothing. The rest of the Beatles are holding brass band instrument. Again, like you said, Paul's instrument is black and wooden, meaning a coffin. There's a hand over Paul's head as though he were being blessed by a priest before being interred, which is freaking nuts. So, and here's my story behind this. This is how deep this goes, okay? The hand in this photo belongs to Stephen Crane, who wrote a short story called The Open Boat, based on his experience of surviving a shipwreck. He and 3 other men made it to a lifeboat, but one of the men drowned when the boat capsized. In his fictionalized version of the story, though Billy, the only character referred to by name, is the strongest of the 4 men in the boat, he drowns when they try to swim to shore. Grazer also notes that Stephen Crane died in his 20s, and a number of the other figures depicted on the cover died tragic deaths as well, including Jane Mansfield, who was decapitated in a car crash. Is that how Jane Mansfield died? Did I know that? I don't think I knew that. Have you ever heard that?
No, I didn't know that.
But yes, like, of course, we left out the bit that in the car accident that killed Paul. Supposedly they had a fight at Abbey Road Studios, which is what led to him driving off in a fit of anger. And then he had that car accident and then lost his head, which is that one lyric. What was it? When Ringo says, "You were in a car crash and you lost your head." Yeah. That dude, if you listen to that song in the context of Paul is dead, it's an eerie, like, ghost song. It's like a campfire ghost song, dude. It's like a ghost story, you know. I listen for your footsteps coming up the drive. Listen for your footsteps, but they don't arrive. Yeah. Because he's dead, Phil. He's dead. Oh, that's good. Let's see. Across the graveside is a bass guitar oriented the way Paul, who is left-handed, will play it. You covered that. The strings of the instrument are made of sticks, but there are only 3 sticks rather than 4, just as there will only be 3 Beatles without Paul.
Mm-hmm.
With a little imagination, you can see if the yellow flowers spell out Paul, or looked at another way, the flowers form the letter P. Load about the drum. Do you know about the drum? Let's talk about the bass drum.
Yeah. Isn't it that someone put a mirror up to it, and if you look at it with the mirror's reflection in it, it reads as a date?
Reads as a date. It reads as it. All right, so it reads as 1X he die, which suggests 11 for the, because there's a 1 and then the word 1 spelled out, which is 11/9 or November 9th, 1966. As the diamond between the words he and die points directly at Paul, which, by the way, it does. It points directly at him. One problem with this, kids, of course, is that the British people do not write their dates in this fashion. They would go day, month, year, and instead of here, we would go month, day, and year. There's one problem with that interpretation.
Yeah, which there are all kinds of problems with that date if it's not 11/9 and it's backwards. It's 9/11. Yikes.
That's a whole other problem right there. So yes, the Beatles predicted.
Yeah, we don't want to get into the 9/11 conspiracy theories. Jesus Christ.
Oh my God, save me from that one. The doll at the right side of the picture, the cloth figure of Shirley Temple, wears a sweater that reads, "Welcome the Rolling Stones." And it's been said the Rolling Stones helped to cover up Paul's death, and the reference on the cover was a thank you from the Beatles. That's pretty good.
Well, doesn't the doll also have a white car on its lap?
It does.
It's like a white toy car, and the inside of the car is red.
Blood red. Blood red. Yeah. Also, the cloth grandmother figure on whose lap the Shirley Temple doll is resting is wearing a blood-stained driving glove. Yeah. Yeah. The Japanese stone figure at the feet of the wax images of the younger Beatles has a line on its head representing the head wounds that Paul sustained in his fatal accident. The 4-armed Indian doll at the front of the picture is Shiva, symbol of both destruction and creation. Two of the doll's arms are raised, one pointing at the waxed image of the younger Paul and the other pointing at Paul himself. My God in heaven. That's pretty good. The television set on the ground to the right of the Beatles is turned off, suggesting that the news of the tragedy had been suppressed. The OPD patch, which has been interpreted as officially pronounced dead.
Yeah, which isn't it really that the patch says OPP, not OPD?
Yeah, you know me. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I had to do that. The Ontario Provincial Police. The photograph makes the final P look like a D. Yeah, because apparently in England it's not dead on arrival. It's officially pronounced dead. It's not DOA. It's OPA. Those Brits and their wacky language, Phil, messing up everything for everybody. So in the Life magazine article, the cover's pretty famous. It's when all this is really happening. It's him on his farm with Linda and their kid, his daughter, right? And the magazine article. And by the way, dude, they had just showed up at his farm and wanted to talk to him about this, and he was not happy. Talk about invasion of privacy, man. But
Yeah.
he relented to have the story done because had nothing to do with money, but they did something or offered him something or whatever to print something, I think, in the column, and he agreed to it. But
wasn't it that they had some unflattering pictures of him that they took when they first got there?
That's it.
And yeah, and in agreements to do the article, they gave him the negatives back.
That's it. Forgot about it. I knew there was something. I couldn't remember it. In the Life magazine article, Paul, or is it Fall, says, quote, "It is all bloody stupid. I picked up the OPD badge in Canada. It was a police badge. Perhaps it means Ontario Police Department or something." So this didn't help clarify anything, right? Because the OPD, there is no such thing. But it actually does stand for, as you said, it was OPP, which is not what everybody here, if you're a 90s kid, thinks it means. It stands for the Ontario Provincial Police. Another distinguishing feature of Sgt. Pepper was that it was the first album to have the song lyrics printed in full on the album cover. The original LP, the song lyrics are printed on the back cover of a picture of the Beatles. Unlike the rest of the Beatles, Paul has his back turned, as we said. The 3 black buttons on the back of his coat representing the mourning of the other Beatles. This is really reaching now. So John, Paul, and George were all about the same height. Paul appears taller than the other Beatles, suggesting that he is ascending to heaven. Next to Paul's head are the words "Without You" from the song title "Within You, Without You." Dude, this is really fun stuff. Like, some of this is ridiculous, but some of it sounds freaking amazingly awesome. Like, wait a minute, is there a conspiracy? Like, it's really starting to feel like maybe there is.
I think that's the fun of it. I think that there is something to conspiracy theories of, having to find these clues and this whole scavenger hunt appeal to it. I get why people are into conspiracy theories, but once you start really believing in this stuff and you start really buying into things, no. And I feel like it's such a prevalent thing now with the internet because it's so easy to put misinformation out there and people will just follow it. Like, if you believe in something enough, no, you believe anything people put in front of you.
Oh my God. Yeah, we won't get into that, but you're right. As we said, George is pointing at words. He's pointing to Wednesday morning at 5:00 as the day begins. Supposed to have been the time of Paul's fatal accident. George positioned his hand in this way, not to point at the printed lyrics, but to make the letter L the first letter in the word love, as the Beatles appear to be spelling out the word love with their hands, which I didn't realize until just now. In addition to George pointing his fingers in the shape of an L, John's hands are arranged in a V, and Ringo's clasped in the form of an E. Well done. The O is missing as Paul's hands are not visible. I've never heard that bit. The lyrics themselves seem to be revealing information about Paul's death and replacement by a lookalike. The title song introduces Billy Shears, who we all talked about, who then tells the audience, in with a little help from my friends, "Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song, and I'll try not to sing out of key." Paul's replacement, William Campbell, but here referred to as Billy Shears, was still working on perfecting his singing voice. Several songs have references to a tragic accident. Good Morning, Good Morning opens the line, Nothing to do to save his life. Call his wife in. One story of Paul's fatal accident was that he had picked up a woman named Rita, and she became so excited when she realized she was in a car with Paul that she threw herself on him. As told in the song Lovely Rita, I took her home. I nearly made it. In A Day in the Life, John sings ominously of a car crash. He blew his mind out in a car. He hadn't noticed that the lights had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. Nobody was really sure if he was from the House of Lords. Paul McCartney dead, the great hoax asserts. Uh, yeah, yeah, but that
Yeah.
wasn't that written about someone else that had actually died. It was a member of the royal family, wasn't it at the time? I think that's a story I remember here.
Yes, I think it was written. I can't remember the specific person it's written about, but it's not written about Paul. Um, yeah, isn't the other? There's another weird. If you want to get into the, did he really get into an accident and blah 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 blah. Uh, Around that time, didn't Paul grow the mustache out because he got into like a real moped accident and he wanted to cover the scar from it on his face?
That's what I'd always heard. Yes.
And so again, if you want to read into this whole, he's not really Paul, and he grew out the mustache to cover up the scars from the plastic surgery. Um, um, that's part of it. Like that, people have. If you, I'm telling you, there are so many like comparisons between like early '60s Paul and like later in his life Paul, and like look at the change in his face, and look at this, and look at that. Yeah, one the mustache was one of them, if I remember correctly too. But that was because he legitimately got into a moped accident, not a car accident.
Yeah. Yeah. Didn't lose his mind on a moped, Phil. It was in a car. So that can't
Yeah,
be right.
didn't he chip his tooth as well? And that was also
Yes, that was obvious in the rain video, I think, is where you could see that
yeah.
that happened. Yeah. So, couple more clues. Here's another clue for you all. In the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band reprise, you can hear a voice shouting, Paul is dead. Yeah, really, really dead. It's toward the end of the song. And by the way, it's there. It's 100% there. But it could also be heard as Paul McCartney is dead, everybody. Really, really dead. But if you listen to it, it's there. I don't know why it's there, but it's there. But actually, what does it really say? I don't have the truth for you. I doubt John's really screaming, Paul is really, really dead. Another bit of audio that's subject to scrutiny is the Sgt. Pepper Inner Groove. Beatles produced a few seconds of gibberish that would play out indefinitely for those with turntables that did not shut off automatically. Played forward. It's just gibberish. Remember that gibberish at the end of the song?
Mm-hmm.
And played at the end of the song. Let's see. I'm not playing it here on this show, but it's. God, that is so hard to figure out.
Yeah, yeah. And I've heard a lot of backwards because I mean backmasking was a thing, and that was definitely a thing in the '60s where people were finding a lot of things that they read as backmasking.
Mhm.
Um, but you'd have to be really listening to something and trying to hear what you think is there to get this stuff.
Yeah, and it's like that gibberish that we just talked about played forward. People are trying to make something out of that gibberish being played forward. If you play it backwards, and Paul supposedly did this, by the way, because he was beyond frustrated by the rumors of secret messages and whatnot. He played this thing backwards himself for the heck of it. And you honestly, if you listen, you can hear the voice say, "We'll F you like Supermen."
What?
Yeah, we'll F you like Superman is what the voice it sounds like it's saying. And when Paul heard that, he thought, Jesus, what can you do? That was his quote. Like, God, there's all kinds of stuff in here. Like at that point, he's like, what are you supposed to do here? Like, well, look what that sounds like. Like things just sound like each other or
Yeah,
like
I
other
mean,
things.
yeah, I mean, if you, it's one of those interpretation things. If you look at something long enough, or if you listen to something long enough, you think you're hearing something, but it's a kind of a psychosis thing as well. Like Like if you look at an ink blot long enough, you're seeing what you want to see.
You're a Beatle, not Beatles, excuse me. Yeah, you are, but you're a Queen fan. Isn't one of Queen's songs played backwards? They're saying "E Pluribus E." What is "E Pluribus Unum"? Which is
Is
their,
it?
I think, which is Latin on the back of American currency. But it's like if you listen, that's what it says. If it's one of their songs played backwards, I forget which one it is. Like,
I
why
don't
would
remember
that be
that.
there?
I don't remember that because they want your money. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, dude, there's a lot of stuff here. Um, yeah, the Pepper album, the songs, all these supposed clues that are there. Are they really there? They're not there. Whatever. Um, in November '69, here you go, Phil. Capitol Records reported a significant increase in sales of Beatles catalog albums, which they believe was tied to this rumor. At the time, Capitol said this is going to be the biggest month in history in terms of Beatles sales, and that was in '69 after all this came out. It benefited the commercial release of Abbey Road in the US, where it comfortably outsold all the band's previous albums. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour, both of which been off the charts since February, re-entered the Billboard Top LPs chart, peaking at number 101 and staying at 109 respectively the entire time. A television special dedicated to Paul's dead was broadcast in New York on November 30th of 1969. My God, even then they were doing retrospectives of this, and it just happened. Good Lord, this man, I'm telling you, this is more than an evening, Phil. You know that. There's a lot of stuff to dig through here. My goodness.
Yeah. I like I said, I guess I can get it because some of this stuff, it's once you start going down a rabbit hole, um, it's fun. But I think people have to realize what isn't. It's not real, and I can understand. Um, After '69, especially, um, it was hard to really believe that this thing that people believed in, this group that people loved, was no more. This band was is coming to an end, and so it made more sense to come up with a hoax that, you know, ended up breaking up the band. Like they couldn't do it anymore. They didn't want to cover it up anymore, and that was the reason why Paul separated himself from the group because he was no longer the guy they knew anymore. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes people just grow apart, and sometimes uh, the person that you idolize, you fixate on, sometimes they change, whether that be physical or other things. People just change, and I know that reality is not fun sometimes. It's not as fun as making up a hoax, but the reality is sometimes things just change.
Dude, a lot of this centers on this idea that they hated this. All four of them hated this. Paul himself was sick of, miserable with the whole thing. They all four collectively and individually hated this. But I've always believed that once this became a thing, that they intentionally, not when it was found, but after it came out, that they said, okay, fine, let's roll with it. And some people may believe that was because, like we just read, it was to spark album sales. I don't believe that, Phil. I don't think they ever did anything for money. I could be wrong. Who knows? I think they did it just to mess with people. John, I think, in my opinion, John spearheaded the whole thing and said, screw it. They want it. Let's give it to them. I mean, dude, is there any possibility that every clue from that point on was just accidental, or did they really start putting things in their albums and on the covers and whatnot?
I think some of it was accidental. I think some of it was people reaching and finding coincidences to fit their theory.
Mm.
I think some of it may have been the Beatles having fun with people. I mean, because we've seen Paul have fun with it over time as well. I mean, he referenced it on SNL. He referenced it on The Simpsons. Didn't he did the cover of Paul is Live with the Beatles in the background with the license plate as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I do think at points they had fun with it, but I also think a lot of this is just pure coincidence.
And as if to defeat everything I just said, if you do the math on this story came out on October 12th of '69, and as of 1970, these four guys are no longer a band. So they wouldn't have known to make jokes about this and hide them in albums and put them on album covers as clues or as means to mess with people. It would have had to be done after '69 when they were already quitting as a band. Because because that's when this blew up was October 12th, 1969.
Um,
Crazy.
yeah, I think that some of this stuff, people are just reaching for things because it was hard to believe that the Beatles were going their separate ways. Um, yeah, again, reality is harsh, and sometimes things that you love don't last.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about here, right? And much like the Elvis thing, people didn't want him to be dead. They missed him. They, arguably the most famous singer in history and entertainer in history and whatnot. And then he's gone suddenly. And then, like, well, like you said, we don't want the Beatles to split up. We love this band. They gave us all these memories. Let's try to, at least in our heads, let's try to do something here to have something to cling to.
Yeah,
Um,
what's easier to believe that two guys that grew up together and were super close and made some incredible music together grew apart, or that John really doesn't like this guy because he's not really his friend?
yeah, well said.
I don't know. I mean, I guess for some people it's easier to believe that they grew apart because Paul was really not here anymore. But the truth of the matter is sometimes people that are friends grow apart. Um, and there are plenty of stories where they had toyed with the idea of getting back together. I do think that they still were friendly towards each other by the time George John died. Um, and in my heart of hearts, I do want to believe that eventually they would have made some music together again. John just passed away before it happened.
Yeah.
Um, but again, life is just unfair, and sometimes things like that happen.
Yeah, it's just, they still had something left. I believe they still had something left. Was it a foursome? I don't know. As a twosome, maybe. I think they still had something left. I think would it have been an album? I don't know. Who knows? I think that
I
there was something anyway.
I think the four of them eventually would have got back together because there are plenty of hints later on in George's career that he missed recording with those guys, and he missed the four of them. So I don't know.
Yeah. It's one of the great what ifs of our time, honestly, is this idea that what if they had gotten back together for one more run or whatever that looked like.
Yeah, and I don't think it would have been like this huge, like rebranding, and they would have got back together and like had this big um new album or something. But I do think that we could have seen them do like a tour or something. I do think that would have happened because clearly to this day, Paul loves touring. So I don't believe that there would have never been a chance for him touring if John they were all still alive. That all four of them showed up on a stage somewhere.
Hmm. Yeah, that would have been something. Jeez. Just imagine if that would have happened. I mean, that's but instead we're left with this, this horrible cover up. You know,
So are you saying that that would be something? Really would be something.
indeed, yes. Yeah, that's
Had to be fall beatboxing on that song. That Paul would never do such a thing.
never. Of course not. I mean, that does explain the crappy solo McCartney albums that we got. You know what I mean? Because like, if it was found out in '69, some of those crappy McCartney albums came after '69. So there you go.
I mean, also went on to make some of his best music after that period as well. Maybe he just found this lane as Billy Shears afterwards. That I don't know. Maybe Linda brought out the best in him, and that's how we got Wings. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to know what Paul's really thinking about this stuff. He's heard it his whole, well, not his whole life, but at least in '69 he's heard it. I mean, how frustrating is this, do you think? I mean, maybe not now, but like it is just a bunch of wackadoodle people. I guess the frustration is not the story itself. It's how people continue to like come at him, asking him questions and trying to prove this story. Like maybe that's what got the best of him. Not the story itself, but how people were poking and prodding at him the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it because Paul's exit from the band is it's very misleading in some ways because depending on who's telling the story, it very much feels like he had already made up his mind that he wanted to do solo stuff. He was the first guy to come up with a solo album. He already had his rollout for the album and everything ready. It made it seem like that he he very much was tired of being a Beatle and he wanted to do his own thing, and that he I don't know, that he was egotistical or like a control freak. But then you also hear things like after the band broke up that he went into a depression. So you don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
I don't think
so,
either is entirely true, is what I mean.
well, no, yeah, for sure. There's another little tidbit here that I'm just now finding that I honestly did not know about. This is interesting. Death rumors had always kind of followed the band around, even in the early days. Mark Lewison, and if anyone's a Beatles fan listening to this, you know who Mark Lewison is. Mark Lewison says that when original bassist Stu Sutcliffe quit in '61, Merseybeat printed a letter from a fan asking if it was true that that this member of the Beatles had been killed in a car crash. But this one was different. The novelist Richard Price, in a hilarious '84 memoir for Rolling Stone, recalls listening to a '69 college radio show with fans sharing their off the wall theories. Here Comes the Sun played backwards at 78 RPM says, "Woe is Paul." He calls the DJ just for the kick of hearing his voice on the radio. You know what 84% of all the coffins in England are made of? It might even be 87% Norwegian wood, which is pretty good. I like that book. That's pretty good. So yeah, the press officer, if you guys again know your Beatles stuff, Derek Taylor is a name you'll probably know. He had brushed off that hoax, saying, "Oh, they're always trying to start one of those. It's happened before. The calls will stop coming in a few days." But of course, this time, as we know, the calls didn't stop, and they just continued on and on and on and on and on, and then just everything goes nuts from that point on. This is madness, dude. You and I have covered the Beatles quite a bit here on the 6M, and we've talked about this idea that people continuously miss the point. And probably one of their favorite acts of all time was Monty Python, and they were George was responsible for getting the Holy Grail made in large part because he helped finance a lot of that movie, right? Like they were tight with those guys. They were both big fans of each other's work, and it kind of like the same thing. Where like you know, Monty Python was ahead of its time. You either got them or you didn't. And if you didn't get that kind of humor, you probably didn't laugh much. But if you could see what they were going for, you had a right. They were your favorite, comedy troupe of all time. So like people who watch or listen to or get into the Beatles, they either look for deep meaning where there is none. And when there is deep meaning, it totally flies over their head because people just don't get who this band was and what they were doing. So a lot of that I think plays into this. I mean, can we even imagine the Beatles mythos today without the Paul is dead stuff? You know what I mean?
No. I feel like it is I feel like it is a testament to just how popular that this band was, that there were so many things about them that took on a life of their own.
Yeah. And by the way, in case you guys were wondering, John's not saying I buried Paul. He's saying cranberry sauce. If you played, I'm so tired backwards. He's not saying I buried Paul. So there you go. Yes, if it says supposedly Paul is dead, man. Miss him, miss him. Yeah. Dude, I don't know. Again, dude, I if I don't stop now, I'll never stop. There's a lot of more stuff here we haven't even talked about. This is nuts. A lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, if you've got a day and you just want to go down a rabbit hole and look at some very creepy stuff and have fun with this, it's worth it. But I don't think anybody should read too much into this and believe that this man is really dead.
That I've seen it. There's a writer here comparing this to Tupac is alive and Stevie Wonder can see. I've not heard the Stevie Wonder can see rumor.
Yeah, I've heard that one a few times. I've heard people that know him make jokes um about him not being able to see. Like I can't remember who it was, but there was somebody that was taking pictures with him, and like he just smiled at the right time, and he's like, "How do you know they're taking pictures?" Like, wait a minute.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, kids, because we have lives to get back to, and we don't want to make this a 3-hour podcast until there's new compelling evidence to present to you. That this is your thumbnail, your very quick snapshot of Paul is dead, and we hope you've gotten a kick out of it because Phil and I believe, despite what you may believe yourself, that Paul is indeed dead. Billy Shears is real, and he's done an amazing job. And you know what? Lost in this whole story, Phil, is the amazing job that this William Campbell's done, or Billy Shears, as this Paul McCartney bloke. I mean, he's done fantastic. So,
One of the greatest musicians of our time. Can't
yes.
even use his real name.
It's a shame, dude. One day the truth will come out. Makes you wonder what name goes on the headstone when one day this man meets his maker. I don't know.
Well, apparently, somewhere at an unmarked grave in Strawberry Fields, real Paul McCartney has his name.
There you go. There you go. So, yeah. Well, there you have it, kids. Paul is dead. Not really. And again, I don't want to be the guy responsible for hoaxing this man. Or not hoaxing, hexing, vexing, jinxing. Maybe that's the phrase. I don't know. So let's try to put a lid on this. Phil, give me your last word on Paul is dead.
Listen, like I said, sometimes these things are fun, but gotta understand how pervasive misinformation can be. And sometimes people get so lost in misinformation that they don't care about the truth anymore because uh, the mystery behind it is more fun. It's more it's better than the truth. But sometimes, man, you just gotta accept the truth of the matter. And the truth of the matter is Paul McCartney is still alive and well, and he's still around touring somewhere. He is. I don't know how this man is still doing it. How he's still touring well into his 80s, but he's still here.
You ever seen him live?
I have not.
You know why? Because he's dead, Phil. It would have been Billy Shears. I saved that till the end. No, I've not seen him live because I don't have $800 for like balcony seats, nosebleed seats. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, man, his tickets are effing outrageous.
I mean, I would assume as much. I'd assume as much. He's one of the longest running musicians in the history of the business. He's one of the most popular and well known musicians ever. I'm sure he's charging outlandish figures.
What's the old line about Apple? Like, why do Apple iPhones never go on sale? Because they can sell them regardless. They don't need to put them on sale. Like, why
Hmm.
are Paul's tickets not cheaper? Because he's Paul McCartney. Get a clue. That's why. He doesn't need to do that. He can sell
People
out
will
every
always
time.
people will always buy the ticket. It doesn't matter
Yes.
how much it costs. It's Paul
Exactly right.
McCartney.
Exactly right. All right, kids, there you have it. Our not so subtle tribute to one of the most ridiculous rock and roll hoaxes of all time. That might be a thing we do on the show. Maybe we'll pick another. Maybe we'll do Stevie Wonder Can See.
Um, yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sure there are all kinds of hoaxes around other people. I know that there's tons of urban legend around Michael Jackson as well. Um, just I don't know.
Yeah,
The
there's a
thing
lot.
is, celebrities are always going to be shrouded in mystery because they're not normal people, man. They live extraordinary lives, and because of that, people find it hard to believe that these things are real and they're ordinary. But no, that they're people just like we are. They just happen to be worth millions of dollars and do a bunch of other strange things that we'll never know about.
Yeah. In the case of these four lads from Liverpool, they're four of the most insanely talented individuals that have ever comprised a band in the history of our planet. And I think we can agree on that. Together they were absolutely at their peak. They were unstoppable. They outsold everyone in every recording studio in every country in the world. No one could touch them. And to be honest with you, they still have records that have not been broken, and probably never will be, because they just continue to be the single most influential band of all time. And others can lay claim to, I'm the greatest of my generation. I ruled the 80s. I ruled the 90s. The Beatles rule all time. And I don't really care if you guys don't agree. If you disagree, you're wrong. And I know that there's such thing as opinions, and they're subjective. And we always say it, guys. A lot of this in the 6M subjective. I say it before any of you guys get a chance to say it. I admit it every time we record, just about, it seems like. But there's no opinion here. I mean, if we're looking at nothing but records and stats and influence, and a lot of that you can't even measure, Beatles' biggest band of all time. I'm sorry. And they continue to be. And Phil, I don't see a time that this even not that Paul is dead, the whole Beatles influence. I don't see a time that this even slows down, because I bet, dude, there's a kid right now, Phil, picking up a guitar because of a Beatles album. That is mind blowing to me, man. In 2023, we're still talking about that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It truly is. All right, kids, there you have it. Go listen to some Beatles records. And by the way, listen to the records we've covered here on the show. We've done Pepper. We've done the White Album. We've done Rubber Soul. We've done Revolver. Oh, man, we do all of them, baby. We've not done Magical Mystery Tour. That'll have to come eventually. So stay tuned for that. Go back and listen to all the Beatles stuff in the 6M. Thanks, as always, for subscribing. Enjoy yourself some Fab Four content. And better yet, also, listen to the music, man, because the music is where it's at. It's always going to be with us. Thank goodness for that. And that is Paul is Dead. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.